Hello and welcome to the CEO Magazine's video shows. This is your host, Nick Vidya, bringing you yet another perspective from our Viral Marketing Summit. Poptent CEO Nick Pahade is a veteran viral marketer with blue chip clients who makes videos go viral. He takes the hard and difficult road to producing quality content that reaches quality audiences as opposed to the typical inflamed content that gets you the numbers, but often with questionable financial returns. He's among the top 50 interactive marketing people identified by the Media Magazine and Ad Age's coveted 40 under 40, among several other accolades. He plays for the big leagues and his position on viral marketing demands consideration. The key message from this conversation will encourage the audience to think about the goal of your campaign rather than the numbers. However, as we have seen with other interviews, there are obviously two goals that need to be managed: popularity and impact. I suggest you also watch the other conversations in the summit to make up your mind. Now, here is Nick with Nick.
So Nick, great to have you on my show.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
All right. So your company specializes in making videos go viral. And I know you've got tons of marquee clients from Dell to Allstate. And recently you did something for 5 Hour Energy, which did very well. So, you seem to have some kind of a science and an art behind making videos go viral. You charge money for that. So you obviously make it happen. I mean, you can't charge money and not make it happen.
Sure. I would say that, no one can predict the next viral video, but there is certainly an art and a science to making video shareable. And that's where we focus, is how do we create shareable content. And there's a variety of different tactics that one can ensue to ensure that video is set up to be shared. Simplest being videos that elicit positive emotion, specifically joy and humor, tend to be the ones that are most likely to be forwarded. Videos that elicit things like alertness, or attentiveness also are likely to be forwarded. Not all that surprising, but things that tend to create a negative arousal are still likely to be forwarded, but a little bit lower on the scale than things that are, dumb or ultimately non-compelling video that people may play but choose not to share.
Now, you've obviously heard, given that you're in the business, you would have heard of the devil child attack video that went viral and within a day garnered something like 4 million hits, right? And that's shock value. And I see that the bar keeps on getting raised in terms of shock. And I know shock is not the only way to make videos go viral, but it seems the videos that we watch constantly keep on increasing in shock value, starting from the videos like Blend Tech, where they put the iPhone in a blender and blended it and so on and so forth. So is shock an important characteristic? Do you, in your way of promoting products and things like that, do you use shock as a value as well?
Shock is a marketing tactic that's been used for decades. It's certainly not a new tactic. We like to combine, what I liked about the Blend Tech was the idea of using shock with humor. And that's what created longevity in that campaign and some irreverence where people still remember it, versus a campaign that goes viral for a day and people may not remember it the next day. For the average online shelf life of a video these days are 2 weeks or less, and in some cases can be hours versus years, if you will. So I think it has its place, but I think it really depends upon what the brand is looking to do and to achieve. And I think when shock comes at the price of authenticity, it fails.
Okay, and by the same token, shock may get you the wrong kind of viewership as well.
Right. I mean, so it can have a very limiting impact. One or two, yes, it attracts. It potentially could attract the wrong audience or not your desired target audience.
So when you sit with a client, what are the key things that you say, well, we need to address these 3 questions or 4 questions or 5 questions so that you can create a campaign? It's not just, well, you've got this idea and this is your video. We just want hits. That doesn't work, obviously.
No, I mean, there has to be a purpose. Hits really, the old adage of how idiots track success is, it's just a tactic and not necessarily an effective one without a purpose. I think we try to educate our clients to be authentic first and foremost. Authenticity is much more important than the ability for a video to go viral. And once we have that, we work with our client or the agency that we're partnering with to ultimately brief our community of creators. And we rely on them really to come up with the ideas that ultimately will hopefully resonate back with the desired target audience.
So you create the strategy and then you engage the creative people, which is pretty much traditional advertising model as well. So you're saying that good video is a good video if it creates a positive impact, and in the past you couldn't share it. You were just thrown into it through the broadcast medium, interrupted, so to speak. But now the same concept can be shared. And so fundamentally what has changed is the channel, but really the advertising principles remain.
Yeah, I think the advertising principles remain. I think technology has created an opportunity to remove any barriers for sharing, making it very easy. For what was you and I sitting around a coffee table having a discussion around, hey, I saw this really cool thing. Now I just click forward and I can send it to all of my social followers or my mom or whoever it is that I desire to share with. So, but I think the same tried and true principles exist as it relates to people and ultimately how we communicate with them.
So in terms of creativity versus resources, in the past, ad campaigns that were successful typically were the ones that put in more resources, more money into them, because primarily due to the cable networks, right? Now that element is taken out of the equation and the viewership is in the hands of the audiences. So what remains is creativity. So what's your experience in terms of creativity versus resources? To be successful in these campaigns, is creativity the key criteria, key ingredient, or are resources, as in the past, still equally important?
No, I think creativity has more and more risen to the forefront, in particular, as you see in today's YouTube world, where production value isn't necessarily as valued by millennials, as an example. In many cases, they actually appreciate lower production value if the ideas can kind of shine through. And when you're talking about communicating in 6-second or 15-second increments, obviously the resources rules don't necessarily apply. When I'm looking for a more passive experience, if I'm in a theater and engaged for some long form content, then I think production value certainly has its play, and cinematography. But I'd say creativity is really more at the core today than it ever has been before, and very much plays into our value proposition at Poptent, where we maintain a community of 70,000 filmmakers that are creating content on behalf of brands or studios or MCNs, multi-channel networks, meaning these new businesses that are living on top of the YouTube platform.
Okay, so if creativity is so important, then what's the importance of strategy? Because obviously creativity creates the contagion, so to speak, that gets your video contagious, right? So is there a trade-off between strategy versus creativity? Is creativity constrained by your strategy still?
Well, listen, at the end of the day, you're still tasked with selling a product or a service. So there has to be a purpose behind the creative message, unless I'm just someone that enjoys sharing my thoughts with the world. But even then, I'm creating myself as a brand, and there needs to be a strategy most likely behind that, unless we're doing it purely for charity or for pure enjoyment. So strategy certainly has its purpose. I think that's one of the great debates that's happening in terms of people determining the effectiveness of a Super Bowl ad campaign.
You
This
guys
year
did something for Dan, I think, right?
we did. Our creators actually came up with the ideas that were used for the Dannon Greek yogurt brand Oikos that featured John Stamos and kind of a reunion of the old Full House team. They came up with a few different ideas that the brand ultimately fell in love with, and then we partnered with their agency, Y&R, who ultimately produced the spot. So it was a great opportunity for our creators to come up and participate in the ideation behind that campaign.
Okay, now sticking closer to the strategy piece. So B2B, well, I'll just take an example, and perhaps easier is my own work. These videos that we create for executives to learn what's cutting edge. So if you want to make a video go viral with a purpose, so we know what our audience is or who our audience is. Unfortunately, that audience is not really engaging in highly emotive stuff. I mean, this is for work, this is for learning, so you don't actively share. You talked about emotions, and in a B2B space, they are easy to share because, as a person, I can share what makes me laugh, what makes me cry, what inspires me, what I'm afraid of. But none of these emotions mostly play in the B2B space. So it's hard to make a B2B campaign go viral. And I'm giving you a very tough example for that reason. So how would you think about a video to go viral, or using viral marketing strategies and tactics to promote a video? How do you create it for a purpose such as that?
Sure. So again, that's where I distinct between what I would call viral video and shareable video. It's hard to make a video go viral, period. Whether you're B2C, B2B, doesn't matter. One can't predict necessarily what's going to happen. Obviously, you can put a tremendous amount of media firepower behind it to ensure that it's viewed, but I think there's lots of effective ways to create videos that are shareable. And for a B2B brand, to your point earlier of the Burger King subservient chicken, it would be silly for most B2B brands to try to put together a campaign like that because it wouldn't resonate. There's no connection, and it would probably have backfired. But a brand like Burger King, it fit very well in their communication strategy. But someone like a Dow Corning or someone like that, it would not be an effective way to communicate with either its target audience or consumers at large. But they could talk about some of the community work that they might be doing. They could talk about how they're creating innovation that ultimately ties back to the consumer. The value of their product and and how that translates to daily life. It might be talking to consumers about their perception of the brand and what they do. I mean, there's lots of different ways to potentially engage to create content that's shareable.
Wow. Now people represent roles, or rather, people manifest themselves in roles. So as an individual, I will share with my family, with my friends, my scuba diving or skydiving videos, and they're great. But that's not something I typically would want to share in my business audience. On the other hand, it's easier for me to share my personal stuff on Facebook and YouTube and perhaps Twitter. But what about sharing business videos where that drive for your friends and family? You wouldn't want to share them. If I came to know something about, the CEO of Overstock.com, I don't think I'll put it on Facebook because most of my friends are not interested in that. So how do you think in terms of channels? I mean, LinkedIn is limiting in that sense. So how do people share videos of the business variety with their colleagues?
Yeah, so there's all sorts of different networks to your point, but that's, it comes back to, and I don't mean to keep belaboring this, but it comes back to being authentic and knowing your network and the folks that follow you. And if you're going to start sharing content, ensuring that the content is interesting to them, or they're not going to open it. At the end of the day, we're all consumers and we have interests and passion points. And if it's not relevant to them constantly, right, they may not resonate with you. But it's a blur. You're right. LinkedIn certainly has its purpose. But my LinkedIn network is in many ways different than the folks that I communicate with on Twitter. And how I communicate with both is also very different than, say, Facebook or Instagram or any of these social networks. So I think you need to be authentic to the network. And you're absolutely right. There are videos that I share with my broader Facebook audience, but that I wouldn't necessarily share with my family, and those that I share that might be more personal, with my family or my children or whatever it may be. So I think it's just a matter of finding that right message. And then I think also the frequency of that message also becomes important. If you're hitting them over the head with 100 promotional, business type videos versus things about you naturally, it's going to reflect in, I think, the network that ultimately you maintain, or that those that maintain interest in you. Versus if you're sending updates about yourself as an individual and on occasion share some things that relates to business, because that's part of you as a person, as an entrepreneur, as someone that's running his own publication. I think just finding that right balance is what's most important.
And eventually, I guess some sort of etiquettes will emerge where you say, these are the different channels, this is how you do it. The data will also tell you how to behave, and things will improve in terms. Now, last question to you is, Nick, the idea of seed numbers, so to speak, when you launch a video hoping to make it viral, it's rare that an unknown video like Charlie bit my finger gets the number it got. But the way YouTube works, the bigger the number, the greater the chances of it going bigger, right? So it's a snowball effect. Do you have strategies for that, or do you leave it to the Almighty?
Part of it is left to the Almighty, but part of it, we're not as involved on the distribution part versus the creation of the content and then the facilitation of creating the content. But I think there's lots of different ways to seed content. I think this year's Super Bowl is a perfect example of, I think the majority of ads this year were all released early throughout the week, or they were certainly teasers that were served up throughout the week, because the Super Bowl has become an experience, not just the live game, but the entire week leading up to it. And I think you saw a lot of advertisers, some of which that didn't even run ad campaigns during the big game, create an experience out of it, i.e. Newscastle being one of them. But I think all of the advertisers created an opportunity to seed content up to the big reveal, as an example.
Right. I think there's a lot of strategy. As you said, there's science and art. The creative is certainly art form. But once you start taking a concept and drilling it down to its core, eventually there are processes that will take over and are helpful. You can't predict, as you said, which one will go viral, but you can have, as I like to call, a masala video. You put the right ingredients, and chances are it will get you the hits you're looking for, even if it doesn't go viral.
Spices are great. They always add flavor. I think you combine that with smart marketing. You can't be too good and just assume that you've developed a piece of content and it's going to automatically be consumed. You need a strong marketing strategy. In many cases, you need to go grassroots. You need to start posting it on the social spaces. You need to go find maybe a celebrity that, or someone with broad distribution that takes a liking in whatever it is that you've created, and then also decides to promote it to create that groundswell.
Understood. Agreed. And Nick, thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking with you. Some great information here, something very valuable for a lot of people. At least one thing we do realize is the numbers don't really matter as much as, like you said, authenticity and purpose. Getting 1 million hits could be something that doesn't mean much if it doesn't get you ROI.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.